Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Action Comics issue 1090, written by Mark Waid, with art by Skylar Patridge, colours by Ivan Placencia and Matt Herms, with letters by Steve Wands. Clark's journey as Superboy continues as the Kents get ready to test out Clark's speed, timing him as he speeds all the way across the Earth in just 24 seconds. Although by the time he gets home, all of his clothing, apart from his cape, has burned off, leaving Clark rather naked and rather embarrassed in front of his parents. The testing of powers and Clark trying to find his limits has been the bread and butter of Waid's time on Action Comics, and as I've said in the past, it's stuff that it's only super nerds like me and like Mark Waid would go over in granular detail like he is right here. Go over how fast Clark is, how his heat vision works, how he goes about stopping bullets that are about to hit an old lady, all that sort of stuff that I've thought about over the years Waid is doing in spades. With Clark burning through yet another costume, he's down to just one left, with Ma warning him that they'll have to watch for it since the family cannot afford to make any more until they sell stock and produce at the local farmers market soon. Clark also figured out that in the time it took him to circumnavigate the world, he would have actually been flying around 60,000 miles per hour. Just no small thing, and he thinks he can be even faster, being that during his circumnavigation, he actually stopped to help a sinking boat near Italy. Interestingly, the Kents bring up Adam Blake and are actually on Clark's side about him being a bit of a weirdo with quite a few red flags, especially after the so-called hero abandoned Clark to deal with the locust swarm all by himself. I kind of guessed that the Kents would back their son, like of course they would, but I did think that they would be open to the idea of someone more mature teaching Clark about his powers, someone else with powers like Clark's. It's good to see where Clark gets his instincts from, because obviously they picked up on the fact that he's kind of a weirdo and kind of like a loner and doesn't really like humans all that much either. Clark knows that Mr. Blake hasn't been around at school for a while, and we definitely know why, as we saw the ending of the last issue where it was revealed that he's working for the US government, specifically General Sam Lane, who he's actually managed to convince him of a plan he has for Superboy, and a plan he is going to get to enact without much oversight from Lane or the government. Despite Mr. Blake being missing, Clark goes about his normal school life, even getting a chance to talk with Lana for once about their summers, and when he suggests that they actually catch up better at the local diner, Lana implies that she is going to go on a date with him. And I love how Clark reacts here, since she's just using the old colloquial term "it's a date" to say that like they're going to get together and talk about this sort of stuff. But Clark, because he's a hormonal teenager, he overthinks things, like all the stuff that Lana is saying, and it's really quite cool seeing all of this stuff in a Superman comic or a Superboy comic. It's stuff that we would see actually in the original Superboy run of the series back in the 1950s and 60s when they were doing Superboy stuff. We'd see this sort of stuff, this relationship, teen, romance, rom-com stuff all the fucking time, and I like that Mark Waid is bringing that back into the book. It's also really cool that a writer like Waid, who is, you know, an older gentleman, is actually quote-unquote with it and kind of gets what the teenagers are about these years. I know that makes me sound old, but that's really the best way I can put it, especially given that a lot of writers around his age or of his generation don't know how to write younger heroes, and when they do, it comes across as forced and very, how do you do, fellow kids? There's a bit of an organic nature here, and it kind of also fits with the kind of timelessness of Smallville. It's like a town that, while it is very modernish, it does have that kind of 1950s, 60s diner feel to it, you know, that you would see in, you know, movies, you know, like Grease and stuff like that, you know, that 1950s, 60s feel. And Clark is a character very much like that, you know, that shucks family farm boy. So that sort of stuff fits really well with his character. Eventually, the big date finally arrives and Clark meets Lana at the local diner, and I love how Waid does Clark's inner monologue as he's just a completely panicked teen. He thinks his abilities are starting to sort of influence Lana. He thinks he's got super pheromones, and he's admitting some sort of pheromone that's like tricking Lana into liking him. So he believes that it's wrong, and he's going to break it off with her. He's just going through all his own head, and it's great seeing just this panicked Clark just trying to figure out what to do. Lana arrives and ends up giving Clark a peck on the cheek, which further confuses him as to if this is a date or something. But eventually they begin talking about their summers, and then Clark asks Lana if she's got a crush on someone or maybe him, and she actually does. Only Clark is shocked to find out out that it's not actually him, technically. It's Superboy, further complicating the matter. And so now he's got to kind of shoot down everything Lana has saying about Superboy being hot, citing how there's no clear photo of his face, so he's probably ugly, and he probably has bugs in his teeth from flying really fast. There's a great bit here where also Lana is going on and on about how dreamy Superboy is, but Clark is not listening. He's kind of tuning it all out. So the speech bubbles are all kind of like gibberish, with the odd word like charming or muscles standing out as the only thing that Clark hears. And I thought that was really interesting because Clark is at a point of his life where being a teenager and like learning that Lana would like Superboy, like you expect him to be kind of like it going to his head a little bit and kind of, you know, bigging himself up a little bit and all that sort of stuff. But I like that Wade is writing him as a character who's a bit more mature than that and is actually kind of upset that Lana would go for, you know, just, you know, the looks and the muscles and everything and not the personality, which is what he was hoping Lana would go for, and hoping Lana would see his personality and who he is rather than the powers he has. And while she doesn't actually know they are the same person, he's still very much hurt by that, and I quite like that. Clark wants people to see him for who he is, a good person, not the actual powers and everything he has in his life as Superboy, despite what people like Captain Comet thinks, where he thinks that Superboy is all that there is and that the powers are what define him and everything. And speaking of Captain Comet, he actually contacts Clark via telepathy, sending him an address in New York State, wanting Superboy to go there and save lives. Clark is quick to excuse himself from Lana's ramblings about Superboy to go and be the hero that she thinks he is, speeding off north, using his X-ray vision to find the place Captain Comet told him to go, which is a high-tech laboratory. Superboy smashes in, and we learn not only is it a facility owned by Dr. Will Magnus, the man who would go on to create the Metal Men, but also Raze, the villain with the psionic helmet that Superboy fought a few issues ago, has broken into the lab with his cronies and is accosting Dr. Magnus for his role in creating artificial intelligence. Every now and then they present the present-day Clark as sort of narrating little bits of his life here, and this is one of them, as we learn that Raze never actually was arrested back when Clark fought him before. Instead, he was kind of spirited away, and I'm guessing it's by Captain Comet and the military, and they're using him to test Clark's abilities and kind of using him as like a scapegoat. And I like that we kind of get that sort of like, I wouldn't call it spoiler, but like Clark already knows what the story's all about because he's lived it, so he can kind of chime in every now and then, was like, oh yeah, we learnt that Raze was broken out of prison by the military. Eventually we learnt that, but he doesn't know it at this point as Superboy. Superboy finds Raze isn't alone, and he has two other beings who have psionic crowns as well, who demand Dr. Magnus call them his masters. Superboy saves the Doctor and goes in to attack Raze and his friends, but the villain gloats about how this is one big trap. At this point, Clark learns that he's fighting his first ever villain team, as Raze and his group call themselves Avalon, the harbingers of an inevitable war. I'm really intrigued to see what Wade has in store for Raze, because obviously this is the second time he's brought the character back to face Superboy. They keep alluding to things like this, like the inevitable war, something is coming, and Raze sees himself and his team as like the only ones who can stop it, and if people, you know, bow to them, they'll be able to save them. It feels like that it's building towards something, and I really like that. Raze is like really Superboy's first ever like big threat he has to fight, first ever rogue really, and I bet he appears in a present day storyline maybe at the end of this run where Superman has to fight, you know, a now older Raze and stop him from again trying to bring this great war he keeps going on about. Avalon uses their abilities to bring Magnus's robots to life, having them attack Superman in a sequence that's very reminiscent of the Fleischer Superman's Mechanical Monsters serial. The present-day Clark's monologue returns, and I really like how he sees what Avalon are doing and what they want. He understands that, but he also understands they are frustrating since they want power by creating problems, and they are problems that only they can solve as long as they are in charge. You know, if they're in charge, the problems go away, but if they're not in charge, they create the problems. It's great having a hero who can see both sides of the argument, but also can see one of those sides is clearly right and one is clearly wrong. It's the beginnings of Clark's journey as a journalist as well, you know, someone who's a seeker of the truth and trying to figure out, you know, through the information he has, what is right and what is wrong. During Clark's fight with the mechanical monsters, Raze and the others raid Dr. Magnus's resource vaults, taking gold, platinum, and something called Element X, which Clark eventually will come to know as kryptonite. Clark is exposed to the kryptonite and it makes him feel feels sick, and realizing he's on the back foot, Superboy retreats, speeding out of the lab. See, there could have been a turn in the story where Clark gets kind of headstrong and he tries to tough it out and take them on head on, and he ends up getting defeated, and it kind of proves Comet right in that he is very headstrong and just, thinking with his abilities, not his mind. But I like that Wade is a lot smarter and doesn't go that route because it's a very tropey route. Instead, he lets Clark kind of come back and actually end up fight them one-on-one, and it's a really cool scene. It's a very Batman-esque scene where Clark ends up going under the building and he starts pulling them in to the ground one by one, taking their crowns and smashing them until only Raze is left. And Raze has a moment like he's fighting Batman, like he can't see where Superboy is, and he's like calling out to him, trying to like goad him to attack. It's very Batman-esque, and it works with someone like Superman, who can appear at any place at any time in a split second because of his super speed. Raze gets angry, demanding that Magnus tell him where Superboy is hiding, but before he can say anything, Superboy appears and takes his crown, crushing it in his hand like an empty beer can. Before Clark can take Raze back to the police though, the Kryptonite affects him again, giving Raze the chance to lay a beatdown on Superboy. Despite being weakened, Clark can still fight back, catching Raze's fist as he calls out to Captain Comet for some help. Clark does get an answer to his plea, but not in the way he expects, as Raze is tasered by the arriving military, led by Sam Lane, who knows this all went exactly like Captain Comet predicted. He knows that Raze and his men will be taken into custody, but Superboy will as well, as the hero becomes surrounded by the soldiers, told by General Sam Lane that he is under arrest by the United States Army. Action Comics issue 1090 was a fun continuation of Superboy's journey to being a real hero, filled with many trials and tribulations, not just for the Krypton Kid, but for Clark Kent as well and his love life, with Mark Waid diving into Clark and Lana's turbulent relationship and exploring a rather realistic and very relatable part of a relationship, which is the budding romance part. It's so much so that I had numb flashbacks about overthinking stuff about your crush that Clark did here. I did all of that as well when I was a teenager, so it was very relatable seeing all of that on the page. With the military getting involved in the story at the end there, I'm intrigued what Wade's take on this is, because Superman getting involved with the military is not a new thing. Superman and Lois did a bunch of storylines about it, Smallville has as well, the movies have briefly touched upon it. Every piece of Superman media has touched on Superman either working for or with the military, so I'm intrigued to see what Wade's take on it is and what he plans on doing with Superboy and the military. All in all, it was a really fun issue. I really enjoyed it, and it was a great part of the Captain Comet Superboy storyline. I'm going to give this issue an 8.5 out of 10. Tell me down in the comments below what you thought of the issue, whether you liked it or didn't like it, and remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already.